Kyle Dubas has a set date in mind for when he wants to hire the next Pittsburgh Penguins head coach, and it's a pretty good one. Pat and I are going to dive into that right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Happy Monday, May 19th to everyone. This month continues to absolutely fly by. I can't believe we're almost to June at this rate, buddy. The conference finals are set to get underway this week, and stay tuned for that because Pat and I are going to make our Eastern and Western Conference final predictions at the end of today's show. But before we get to that, we have a couple more updates on the Penguins coaching search to dive into. So last week, we really went into some of the candidates that have been reported so far, including Mitch Love, did a deep dive on him, Jay Woodcroft, DJ Smith, David Quinn, et cetera, et cetera. But today, Josh Yowie had a really nice sit down with Kyle Dubas, probably the most candid sit down we've seen from Dubas since his tenure started almost a year ago. And during that sit down, I'll put the link to that story in the description box for both YouTube and on audio. Dubas said that he wants to have a coach in place by June 1st. And that's kind of a deja vu moment because you remember, Pat, he was hired on June 1st, 2023. So he wants to have a coach in place by that date. So basically, people, that is 2 weeks, honestly. So he wants to have a coach in place in the next couple of weeks for A, the scouting combine, B, all the draft prep, C, all the free agency prep, and D, all the trade market prep as well. He wants this coach to have as much time as possible throughout the month of June to get comfortable with the organization, get comfortable with what they want to do, and all that other good stuff so that they have, again, that full month before free agency starts. And then, of course, the trade market is going to be really kicked into high gear during the draft too. It sounds like, at least to me, that they're going to be wrapping up the first round of interviews probably this week. And then if I had to guess, during the week of Memorial Day, which is next week here, at least in the United States, I think you're going to see the second round of interviews and a finalist group emerge. And then from those group of finalists, however many they are, 3 to 4, maybe even 5 coaches, Dubas will pick the best one that he thinks can lead the organization now and into the future. Also sounds like to me, Pat, I think he wants to interview some more coaches that are still coaching right now, whether it's the NHL or the AHL.
Dubas dropped a lot of good nuggets to Josh Yohe in this sit down. And you're right. This is maybe the most open we've seen Kyle Dubas since becoming the Penguins president of hockey operations. He did say he wants to bring the finalists to Pittsburgh the last week of May. So that kind of tells you that this process is moving right along. He also said that he hasn't heard from a lot of these coaches that they're kind of worried about where this organization is right now. And it would be fair if they were, because this is a very weird situation to come into where you're not a contender, but you're also not in a full-scale rebuild either. So it's a very big challenge for whoever takes on the job of head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. The other thing I also kind of want to point it out, because I've seen this kind of emerge since Josh dropped his sit down, that this is a bit of a rushed process. I would push back on that and say, sure, they want to cast a wide net. They want to bring in a bunch of different voices, but I think 2 things on that. One, we know from Dubas's own words in his press conference after they moved on from Sullivan that this had been something in his mind for a while. So you have to figure that there were already candidates he and others may have had in mind that they had already identified. And over the last week, we really started to see a trend emerge in some of the candidates that have been named. We're looking at guys who have developmental experience, whether it's the American Hockey League, juniors, or assistant coaching experience in the NHL. So this isn't going to be a quote unquote retread. It's going to be guys who are looking to take that next step. And that fits right in line with where the Penguins organization is. They're going to identify a lot of players who are looking to take the next step. And who better to do that than a coach who has done that with multiple players throughout different organizations. So it does seem like at this moment, as we record this on Monday, May 19th, that Mitch Love is the leader in the clubhouse for the job. Josh said that he has heard that he is very impressed the Penguins management. So I think this is also very smart. This is the last thing I'll say on that part of it is deadlines spur action. And you want to make sure this guy is around for the combine, for the draft, for free agency, for anything that you might do in the trade market, because this is going to have to be a very collaborative environment and relationship with the next head coach and Kyle Dubas. So giving them that much runway to have input on the direction of the franchise is extremely important.
100%. And I don't understand why people are saying that, like, oh, they're rushing it and all that stuff. I don't think they're rushing it at all. There's only 4 head coaching positions left right now. Again, Boston, Chicago, Seattle, and Pittsburgh. And by all indications, it seems like potentially Jeff Blashill might be going to Chicago pretty soon. So that might leave, again, only 3 teams in need of a head coach. If anything, they're taking their time with it, which is totally fine. We got a couple of comments last week saying, like, oh, how does it feel to be one of the last 4 teams left for a coach? Feels fine. They're taking their time with this. They're doing their due diligence. They're completing interviews. They still want to interview coaches that are still coaching both in the NHL and the AHL. I kind of wonder if they want to talk to any of Paul Maurice's staff. Like, that's something that really jumps out to me when I read that was, is there anyone on that staff and also the Dallas Stars staff that the Penguins really want to talk to during this process? Obviously, Todd Nelson, he's still coaching in the AHL for Hershey right now. I would like to think he is on the list as well. So they're still not even done with the first round of interviews yet. Once they are, and it's probably going to be this week, then they're going to trim this down to the final few finalists, and then they'll make their decision from then. So yeah, a lot of weird takes out there. I don't think they're rushing this, but I also don't think that they're just operating at a snail's pace. They're operating at the pace that they said they were going to once they set out on this journey, fired Mike Sullivan, and started the process of looking for his replacement. June 1st, that's a big day to hire a coach because the scouting combine, Pat, it's held from June 2nd to the 7th. So literally right after that day, if that is when the new coach is hired, that coach is going to have to go to the combine with Dubas and all that good stuff. So again, the timeline is totally fine right now. I don't know why we're seeing so many weird takes about that. Lastly, if you wanted to ask me who the top favorite is right now, I would probably say Mitch Love. But again, anything can still happen at this juncture. Right now, I would probably say Mitch Love, but I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again at some point here down the line. But right now, I would have to think that he is the favorite too. Do you have anything else to add on the search?
It does feel like Love is the leader, as I've said. The other thing that I want to make sure is out there that we keep in mind, and this was heavily emphasized in Josh's article, is that all of these meetings are virtual. They're happening over Zoom. Yeah. And we'll see what happens with interpersonal relationships when you actually meet the person, when you actually sit down at the same table and discuss things and how they come off in those interviews. It's not difficult to look good in a Zoom interview. And that's not me saying that suddenly Mitch Love's candidacy is going to tank and they're going to suddenly put him at the bottom of the list. But this is part of the process. You are going to have these virtual interviews. You're going to have these telecom interviews, and we'll see what happens. I think it does feel like Mitch Love is the top candidate. I'm very impressed with his work. I think he'd be a great hire. But like you said, could be somebody on this Final Four staff that they're looking into that they haven't gotten permission to talk to yet. That might push things back. That's the one last thing I wanted to add is plans can change. He says he wants to do it by June 1st. It doesn't mean it has to happen by June 1st. It would be ideal, but say there's somebody on one of these teams in the Final Four staff that they want to talk to. They don't get permission because of the grind of the playoffs, and it pushes them back. So we'll see what happens, but I like where they're at right now, and I'm very curious to see who we find out comes to Pittsburgh for these interviews.
Same here. I'm curious to see if we get more reports this week about some other first round interviews and all that good stuff too. So stay tuned right here on the Locked On Penguins podcast for all the details and all the updates regarding the coaching search and everything else regarding the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that will do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to do 2 season reviews in one segment. We're going to review the season of Matt Nieto and Noel Acciari right after this. Before we get to that, though, we have to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, we're back here on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Ambit. Pat, we don't usually combine players for our season in review segment, but we felt like it was right to do these two together with Nieto and Acciari. They had 2 underwhelming seasons yet again this year. You look at the numbers for both Nieto and Acciari. Nieto, 1 goal, 3 points in 32 games. Acciari, 79 games, 5 goals, 12 points during that time. The underlying numbers also not very good. Acciari played almost 900 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time this year. When he was on the ice, the Penguins only had 44% of the shot attempts, minus 25 in goals for, which is, again, I don't like looking at plus minus that much, but still, minus 25 in goals for at 5-on-5. He was only a minus 8 last season. Just crazy how he fell off even more in that department this year. 45% expected goal share, 46% scoring chances, 44% high danger chances. Yes, Mike Sullivan did deploy that line a lot in the defensive zone. He didn't really give Acciari's line a lot of time in the offensive zone. He'd been doing that for the last couple of seasons, which I do felt like was at least a little bit of a fair critique, because you're kind of screwing him over a little bit by not giving him any offensive zone time. But on the other side of it, he wasn't really showing you that he deserved a lot of time in the offensive zone. Again, it also goes back to why bring him in the first place for that contract, to just fill that defensive role in the bottom 6. He's fine with his physicality. He can throw some big hits. He's sometimes okay on the penalty kill, but he's not going to give you any offense. I think he makes too much money for his role. I got to give him a low grade this year too, man, right around the D range. I was thinking about an F, but I didn't want to be that rude. But I think right around a D is totally fair for Acciari. Then for Nieto, only 32 games. I applaud him for coming back from those injuries. Takes a lot of guts, takes a lot of courage, but you can tell he's not the same player anymore. He's a UFA now. I don't see any reason to bring him back. The experiment just didn't work out for him, and it hasn't worked out for Acciari. Both low grades. I would give them both D's, and if you want to argue an F, I won't argue that at all.
Yeah, it's really kind of two, like the rundown says, it's 2 bottom 6 forwards with very similar stories. They just did not work out. Like you said with Matt Nieto, I give him all the props and love in the world for trying to come back from some absolutely horrific injuries, but he's just not the player we had hoped he would be. I will give Nieto an incomplete grade just because 32 games, he dealt with injuries, he dealt with some demotions to the AHL. And I know a lot of people will hear that and say, well, you got to give him a low grade, but it's just, there's too many other factors at play for me to really give him a grade. Like you said, he only made $900,000 this year against the salary cap. He's an unrestricted free agent. Shake his hand, thank him for trying, and move on. Matt Nieto, it's or not Matt Nieto, excuse me, Noel Acciari, same kind of deal. I mean, $2 million for him is a pretty hefty price when you look at his stats. He's
They
played
got to figure out a way to get out of that contract either this summer or if you do take him into next season, I think a team will maybe consider kicking the tires on him around the trade deadline. That's also when I would look to move him. But I still, even this summer, I look to get out of that contract if you can. It just hasn't worked out.
Even if you got to attach a draft pick to it, I wouldn't hate that idea just to get more cap space. And we know how many draft picks they have over the next 3 years. They can spare one or two, especially if it's a third round pick or something like that. I don't think they'll miss it too much, but 79 games, 12 points. You brought up plus minus. This is the thing I always say on this show. I absolutely agree on the whole that plus minus is a bit of an outdated stat, but it's when you start getting those wild swings that you can actually look into it. Minus 25 for a bottom six forward who is supposed to be good defensively, to me, shows a failure of his abilities and his
it's
job.
Only at 5-on-5, by the way. It's still really bad.
Right. And again, it's what I always say about plus minus. If it's at minus single digit or plus single digit, you can't really read too much into it because we've all seen it. And if you're like me as somebody who plays beer league, which new season starts tonight, let's go CIA, but you can hop over the boards right as somebody scores, and that gets you a dash or a plus. Doesn't mean you were part of the outcome, but once you start getting into those wild swings north or south of 10, trend lines start to emerge. And in his role, he was unable to keep the puck out of the net and play well defensively. A lot of that is goaltending. A lot of that is the team as a whole. But again, I want to see a player like that do better. And I agree to your point that I think another team would take a chance on him because Noel Acciari has a pretty solid track record of being a solid bottom six forward. And this is another player I look at in relation to the Penguins. We talked about this with a different player in a different position with Alex Nedeljkovic. It's just wrong place, wrong time. This is not a good situation for a player like Noel Acciari. You put him on a team that makes the playoffs, wins a round or two, he'll have value on a better team. But on this team, it's just not there.
Right. I think that's totally fair. I think he would have at least a little bit of more value on a bona fide playoff team. You can stick him on your fourth line. He can be like that physical forward that will lay the boom when it's needed. He can play a little bit on the PK. You can maybe get a clutch goal, maybe out of him, but there's not as much pressure on him in that sort of situation. Here, with the contract that he has, the role that he has, at least that Mike Sullivan had him for these last couple of years before he got fired, it was just too much. Again, I understood at the time why Dubas signed him. I actually understood the plan that he was going with when it came to the bottom six. He was trying to make two of those lines, quote unquote, checking lines a little bit while getting the scoring from the top six on the top power play. But the thing is, in today's NHL, you need four lines that can score. So I felt like looking back at it now, while I understood what he was going for, I felt like it was a little bit of the wrong mentality. And I still think they need to find whatever way possible to probably move on from him during the summer because there's just really, I don't think his value is going to increase exponentially this season. Again, you might be able to get something small for him at the deadline, a late round pick, but other than that, you're really not going to be getting much. Hell, maybe even future considerations, but I don't think you're going to see his value go a lot up this year, even with a new coach in place and a new system.
No, highly doubt that. And this is the last thing I'll say on it is there aren't a lot of parallels, if any, but if there is one between Kyle Dubas and the Ron Hextall era, they both fell into that trap of wanting to make your bottom six this Pokemon style, harden, play defense, nothing but defense. That's not the modern era of the NHL. We don't need to, it would be nice, but you don't need to go all the way back to the cup runs of 16 and 17 where you have HBK as your quote unquote third line, but they have to chip in. You have to have role players who can score you 5, 10, 15 goals if you want to have success. And obviously we know that's not where the Penguins are right now, but you still have to build towards that. And it looks like that's what they're doing with a lot of these prospects. You look at Ville Koivunen, he'll be if he develops the right way, he will be a bottom six contributor who will play extremely well defensively and occasionally get you some offense. So they tried it. It didn't work. They got to try to move on.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of, the bottom six stuff with Dubas, that was a legit criticism of his during his tenure in Toronto, is that he struggled with some of the depth forwards there. So I still want to see him learn his lesson a little bit more going forward with the Penguins. I mean, you're seeing Brad Treliving kind of making those same mistakes right now with Maple Leafs. And speaking of the Maple Leafs, Pat and I are going to discuss how the Panthers beat them to a pulp in Game 7 on Sunday night right after this. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Amp. And Pat, the conference finals are officially set. I went 3 for 4 in my second round predictions. So we will have Dallas versus Edmonton. I got Dallas right, Edmonton wrong. I thought Vegas would win that series. I will take the L on that. Dallas, Edmonton, a rematch of last year's Western Conference final when the Oilers beat the Dallas Stars. And then in a rematch of the Eastern Conference final from 2 years ago, we will have the Carolina Hurricanes taking on the defending Stanley Cup champs and the Florida Panthers. This is now the Panthers' third straight trip to the conference final, and they will try to make it their third straight trip to the Stanley Cup final as well if they can take down the Carolina Hurricanes. But Pat, my friend, this might be it for the Maple Leafs and the Core Four. They got embarrassed once again on home ice. I am sure that some Leafs fans are still trying to blame Kyle Dubas for their failures, even though it has been 2 years since he left. I put a viral tweet about it last night on my Twitter account. Some Leafs fans were mad about it. Others actually understood it, which was surprising for me. But this actually might be the end of that era for the Maple Leafs. But the Panthers, nothing phases them at all. They lose Game 6. It looks like, oh, this might be the year the Leafs break through. They're going to do it. Panthers go in there, absolutely dominate them from start to finish, especially in that first period. They had the first 25 shot attempts of the game. The second period, they beat them to a pulp. And then the third period, they give the Leafs absolutely nothing, even though Max Domi tried to get them back into the game. You saw Mitch Marner barking at the team when he's coming back to the bench. Just a horrendous loss for the Leafs. But the Panthers, they look like a juggernaut once again. And I will take the Panthers in 6 games to go back to the Stanley Cup final over the Hurricanes. This is the type of series that the Hurricanes struggle in, where sure, they can win a round or two when they have the high-end talent advantage, but as soon as they play a team where that team's big dogs are better, they struggle and the quantity over quality doesn't work as well. So I will take the Panthers in 6 to win this series.
I'm right there with you. I'm taking the Panthers in 6. For all the same reasons, and I'm going to use the context. And before I talk about the Leafs real quickly, to what you said, that's what the Panthers did against Toronto, a team that, regardless of how you feel about that group, that's a group with high-end talent. And we can talk about how they didn't show up because they didn't, but you also have to remember 2 teams play the game. And Florida gave them nothing in most of that series. They gave the Leafs absolutely no openings. They shut down the Stars. And I look at Carolina, very good team. They don't have that same kind of firepower. Now, we'll see who wins out here because Carolina's done a pretty good job of holding a lot of really good players off the board in the first two series. Now, I know New Jersey had their injuries, but still a good team. Shut them mostly down. Washington, all their top players were very quiet against Carolina. Can they do it 3 times in a row? I'm very skeptical, but we'll have to see what wins out. My gut tells me that Florida is going back to the Stanley Cup final for the 3rd straight year. As for Toronto, man, I don't know. This has to be it. Unless John Tavares wants to take a deep, deep discount. Thanks for everything, hometown kid. We'll see you later. Same for Mitch Marner. I look at him and I still think the criticism that people levy about oh, there's so much pressure in Toronto. There's so much this, that, the other. This is pro sports, man. NFL teams seem to do pretty well with all the pressure. LeBron James has seemed to do pretty well with all the pressure. The New York Yankees, the Los Angeles Dodgers, they all seem to do pretty well with the pressure. This isn't a unique thing, man. Pressure or not, you got to get it done. But I look at Marner, and I think that's a guy who he's going to go somewhere like Vegas, and he's going to be just fine there. And not because there won't be a spotlight, but because he's not going to be one of the guys. He will be a role player and contributor for that team. And I think that's what the doctor is going to order for him. One thing I want to say about the West, man, all the love in the world from me to Mark Scheifele, man. I'm someone who lost his dad suddenly and unexpectedly. The guts of that man to go out and play a hockey game after that. I went and played BS pickup hockey with some friends days after my dad died unexpectedly. And even that was tough. I can't imagine being in the Stanley Cup playoffs and scoring the opening goal of the game with that weight on your shoulders. So shout out to him. Heartbreak loss for them. But man, Dallas and Edmonton, are you ready for some fun hockey in the Western Conference Final?
It was so tough watching Scheifele hug all of his teammates. His hug with Connor Hellebuck almost brought me to tears, if I'm being honest. I mean, again, I'm only about a month removed losing my uncle unexpectedly. So again, I get it from that degree, but I can't imagine, playing a game literally hours after. But also, Pat, he played his ass off in that game. His dad would be so freaking proud of the way he played. He almost had another goal later in the game. One heck of a save by Jake Ottinger, but I felt like he was the best player on the ice for the Jets, right up there with Hellebuck. Hellebuck played so good. That's, I think, his best start on the road in the playoffs by far these last couple of years. He gave the Jets chance after chance to win that game. Just wasn't enough. But yeah, man, Scheifele played his heart out, and it was really tough just seeing that handshake line, seeing him hug all of his teammates. But I will say, even after all the physical stuff happens in a series, once the handshake line comes, even though it was tough to watch, you saw just how much everyone on that Stars team respected him. They gave him at least a 2-minute handshake. That's what it felt like, just giving him their condolences, all that stuff. That is one of the moments when hockey is at its best, in my opinion. And you saw everyone come together on the ice there to really just help him. And as for the Stars, I know a lot of people are going to say this is the team to beat right now. I totally understand it. They can run 4 lines. Ranson is going nuts. Haskin is back playing 20-plus minutes a night. Jake Ottinger is going off. I might have a hot take for some people here. I'm going to take the Oilers in 7 games. I'm going to take them here. I think they are playing better this year right now than they were last year in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They might be getting Matthias Ekholm back this series, which would be so huge for them, considering how good he is defensively. McDavid and Draisaitl are going off. They're getting their depth scoring this year, which has been a major problem for them in the last couple of years. I really think this is a coin flip series. And in the end, I will take McDavid and Leon by a hair. And I will take them in 7 games, and I think we will get a Stanley Cup final rematch. I might be dead wrong on this, and the Stars might go out there and kick their butts, but I'm going to go with the Oilers in 7 very close, hard-fought games.
Let's run it back. That's what I'm saying. I think we're going to get the same Stanley Cup final that we did last year, Edmonton versus Florida, and I'm with you. It's going to be 7. The question for me for Edmonton is what version of the Oilers shows up in this series? Do we get the first round Edmonton Oilers, who Connor and Leon had to put them on their back and they kind of took advantage of an LA team that beat themselves? Or are we going to get the version of the Oilers from the second round against Vegas, who they were firing on all cylinders, whether it was Connor and Leon or everybody else? If that version of the Oilers shows up, give me them in 7. If we get the version of the Oilers from the first round, though, still think it can go 7, but then I would take Dallas. But my stance, my 10 toes in the ground take, Oilers in 7, we're getting a rematch.
Yep, I'm going to go with that as well. And the conference finals will officially start this week. Can't wait for it. And then after that, of course, a Stanley Cup final. And then all the madness is going to start, Pat. You got the draft, free agency, the trade market. It's going to get busy very quickly once the season is over. But that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another show for you all on Tuesday. So for Patrick Damp, I'm Hunter Hodes. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow.